Hey friends, thanks for hanging out. We're gonna get started here in just a minute. This is live. Woo! All right, cool. Well, hey friends, go ahead and get this little live stream thing kicked off there. Thanks for hanging out. It's Tuesday afternoon. I've just been kind of digging into a week here. Got a few days off that I took, kind of bookends for the week there. So today's technically Monday for me. But for me today, I was trying to draw a new dinosaur. That's what the name of the game is here. I got this little guy here. Now, I use a lot of dinosaur art in my videos. If you watched any of my training, you've seen the stuff on YouTube there, and of course the stuff I'm doing at CBT Nuggets as well. And frankly, the dinosaurs are kind of a fun little shtick. I love dinos to begin with, and I love drawing art. And these particular ones, since we're kind of talking about them, you may have seen them in some of the videos as well. This one is this is a Ceratosaurus, kind of a cool little predatory dinosaur. He's got a little horn on his nose there, one of my favorites. And this is really a part of a series of toys that I have from the original Jurassic Park toys series. So if you ever had any of the old packaged Jurassic Park toys, you know, some of you probably did. Okay, these came in there. This was back when toys had these little collector's pieces to them. This was under, I guess they do that a lot nowadays. This is a little Stegosaurus one. Got a Gallimimus back here as well. And some of these, you probably have seen them again in my training videos. I love the colors. They're die cast, they're metal. It's pretty cool. I got a little Brachiosaurus here as well. Anyhow, so I just got done doing a bunch of recording for the serverless application model at AWS, and I wanted a new dinosaur friend to come join me for the last set of videos. So that's kind of what I'm going to work on today. Now, I've never drawn the Ceratosaurus before. He was in this last set of videos that I recorded. In this particular metal one, they've got this kind of like bluish gray body on it, and this kind of like red, like blood red head on top of it. Looks pretty cool. So I'm going to try to mimic some of those color schemes that they use there. Good times. Now, anytime I go to draw a dinosaur, I usually do a little bit of research. I mean, sometimes I'll just bust them out and draw them freehand completely. But when it's a new one and you want to kind of catch, the vibe and get the right feel for it there, I usually go and do just a little bit of research. So let me jump around online here. That way everybody can kind of see a little bit of what we're looking at. Bring this on over. And if you've seen a Ceratosaurus before, nice. That's one of the more, it's not a super well-known dinosaur. So let's jump on in here. And of course, friends, make sure you get yourself registered to vote today. Very important. Oh, man. All right, so let's see here. Ceratosaurus there. Cool. Now, Ceratosaurus is one that's been around for a while. There's been a lot of artist renditions of him. Okay. And so I usually like to go and look at some pictures that other people have drawn of them. Part of what I'm looking for as I'm cruising through here is the pose. So are we looking like head on? Do we want to go 2/3, left to right, right to left, that sort of thing? The other part that I'm looking at too is I like to see the coloring, maybe some of the ways that they've posed them. Here you can see this one's got his mouth wide open. That's kind of a cool view. Well, that one's pretty cool. I like kind of the line styling on here. This is kind of an interesting dinosaur. He looks a little bit like an iguanodon with the horn on the nose there. The way that they drew them erroneously way back in the day when they first found the iguanodons. And then later they put the thumb claw properly where it should be. But this one does have it on here correctly. So these are some nice little drawings to kind of get an idea of what that's going to look like. Yeah, we zoom in on them a little bit. That looks pretty good. The other thing that's kind of cool to look at is to just check out the skull itself. Because the skulls are really, I mean, that's what's forming the basis for the dinosaur in the background there. So let's see if we can zoom out just a little bit there. Kind of get a feel for it. Now, I've drawn velociraptors and I've drawn a lot of tyrannosauruses and allosaurs. And this guy is very similar to those. I mean, you got the kind of the classic theropod head. So that looks pretty easy. I can probably work with that. And the key thing is that they've got this boss or this nose bone on the front there. So I'm going to keep some of these drawings kind of handy as I go into the sketching process. And this pose left to right is probably going to work pretty well for me. Remember, I use these as little pop-ups. They're little dinosaurs that'll fly up onto the screen and say stuff during the training videos. So let's go ahead and jump on into getting this drawn. Now, what I'm doing over here is I have a Adobe Illustrator. This is the suite that I work in. And it's maybe not everybody's first choice for drawing and illustration. It's a vector-based program, but what I like about it is that I can get really crisp, tight, pixel-perfect lines out of it. And in particular, what I'm using is a couple of brushes. Okay, now I'm using a Cintiq drawing tablet over here, so I actually have a drawing screen that you can kind of see. I don't know if you can kind of see me. Pop that up on the screen there. Oh, I took it off. Okay, hold on a sec. Copy that over. Yeah, there we go. Hey, I came back on. So I've got a little Cintiq drawing screen right here that I can draw. And you can see my hand kind of glowing from the white screen on top of it there. And then I'm using a couple of basic brushes that I like to use. These are pressure sensitive calligraphy brushes. So I get, a variable width line that I can draw. And I'm using the little drawing tablet, but that works really well for giving me nice thin lines. And then I use a couple of different thicknesses in there, depending on what I want to draw. The big challenge for me is that I'm a pencil artist. So by default, I usually would draw really, really thin, sketchy lines. And when you're working with digital art like this, if it gets too busy and you start shrinking that stuff down to like thumbnail size or down lower third size for windows on there, a lot of those lines that you're drawing on there, they're just going to go right out the window. Instead, so I try to think more about kind of like the two-tone or three-tone drawing idea. So I'm going to put down a mid color, and then I'm going to put down a shading color, and then I'm going to put down a highlights color. And instead of trying to rely all on my black line, sketchy line work to do that, I'm going to try to use thicker brushes. Okay, that's going to make a simpler line. And then I'm also going to try to count on the shading to kind of pull out some of the depth and stuff without me having to go and cross-hatch a whole bunch on there. The other thing that I'm doing too is I'm restricting the size of the screen that I'm working with. So this is a 720p drawing area that I've got here, and that fits the dimensions that I usually capture in and record in. So that way, as I'm drawing it on here, I can get a feel for how it might fit on the screen and then shrink it down and reduce it later on. So let's go ahead and clean that up. Now, when I first get to drawing, the other thing that you'll notice is I have a couple of different layers that I'm using up here. I usually have a black layer and then a color layer, and then another black layer or a color layer. And I may not use black and color, but the idea is that this would be the line work, and then I'd have the shading that goes underneath of it. So you kind of get everything to draw behind the sketch that you've done already. So I'll be using that once I get the sketching part of it finished. Cool. So let me go ahead and get one more layer in here, put that down in the back, and I'll call that my sketch. Cool. And this one, I'm going to just let myself indulge the pencil drawing side of me. Typically, I'll go with like a dark gray pen, and then I will adjust the opacity down quite a bit. So maybe like 75% here. The idea is that when I'm using it, I want it to work as much like a pencil as possible. So I have the ability to make these lines, but then as I come back later on, I can keep layering over top of them, and it'll make it darker and darker because of the opaque layers building up on top of it. Okay, so that gives me a chance to kind of think about just trying to draw like a pencil would, and that way I can kind of play with the lines, play with what I want it to look like a little bit. And so if we take a look back over here at our Dino, some of the things that I try to do is keep in mind the dimensions that I'm working with. So from the back of the skull to the front of the skull, try to come up with a couple of mile markers. You'll notice that the teeth end roughly halfway through. That's a pretty classic theropod dinosaur style. Okay, you'll also notice that the ocular bone, this little circle area in here, this is where the eyeball would have been. That is about halfway the distance back to the back of the skull. So just in a basic dimensions here, there's a long snout with all the teeth out in the front half. And you've got the back of it where all the muscles are tied in. These are going to be the big muscles that would open and close the jaw. Okay, and then of course you've got your lower teeth, and the lower teeth are roughly a third of the way of the distance from the end of the jaw to the back of the jaw. And you'll notice that if you've ever looked at reptiles like snakes and stuff, these guys have a really, really deep jointed jaws in the back. That allows them to open their jaws really super wide just to gobble up all of those creatures that they were noshing on. Okay, the other big things to kind of notice here is, of course, you've got the nose cavities up front. Roughly a pretty consistent thickness through the back of the top of the skull. You've also got these little horn ridges just forward of the eye as well. And then you've got a nice little bone in the back, and that is actually part of where the muscles would attach. So the muscles went through there all the way down, and imagine them being real elastic and being able to kind of crush and nosh. So based on that, I know that I can go ahead and just kind of get started on a rough, like a theropod style head here. And I know that that's going to be roughly about like this. And I know that the teeth kind of end roughly in there, kind of around like this. And just based on what I've done in the past, I know roughly what these dimensions are going to look like. And I can kind of go back and consult that a little bit there. Does need a little bit more of a taper on the nose, I think. Kind of like that. And if I don't like the line work, I might go down to 50% here, make that a little bit lighter. While I'm in here, I can go ahead and just kind of get the eye in. So for me, it's all about basic head shape and getting that eye in the right place, because everything else is going to be roughly based off of that. And then I'll even go as far as to kind of think about where the eyeball would be positioned inside of there. Out here, you've got the nose, you've got kind of the mid cavity, you've got the cavity for the muscles in the background here, and they would fit down onto the jaw. Other things that are important about the jaw is you also want to kind of think about the taper. So the jaw gets thinner at the bottom and it gets thicker up here at the top. So that means I might need to taper this just a little bit more. And I do kind of want to show it in the 2/3 look that they had kind of in the skeleton picture there. So this is getting pretty good. And let's maybe kind of fix up the head a little bit there like that. You'd get that big crest kind of in the back here where the muscles would have attached. Okay. The other thing that I'm kind of thinking about too is that as much as I like to draw really fearsome looking dinosaurs, I like them to be kind of quirky and funny. So really kind of leaning into a little bit of a smile in here. I'm trying to think about that early on. Later on, when I go to do the outlines, I'll pull out a lot more of that content. Okay, so for good old Ceratosaurus here, let's go ahead and kind of just fiddle with the thickness a little bit. It's looking pretty good. And then the jaw, the teeth would be roughly around in here like this. And again, I'm just kind of trying to get this fleshed out based on the skull that we're seeing here. The other big thing that I need then is to go ahead and figure out these horns like this. And I think, you know, based on that, yeah, that's looking pretty good right there. They're forward of the eyes. And then typically that would be part of what I think I call it the brow ridge, like the eyebrows there. Cool. The other thing I'm thinking about too is, you know, foreground, background, what's going to be in front of the other parts of it. So this is looking pretty good. As I'm kind of drawing through this, and I got to get the nose on here, start playing with how that looks. Does it turn up a little bit there? Yeah, I guess it kind of does. And the interesting thing too, friends, is when you look at these fossil skulls, there's usually lots of kind of like weird, gnarly, bumpy stuff. And sometimes they were diseased or they had damage to their skulls. So there's things that are coming out in the bones that you wouldn't necessarily draw with the flesh on. Okay. And then with the big theropods like that, we want to sketch in the nose and get that nice and dark there too. And you can kind of see by using this light pencil, it gives me that shading ability that I was talking about. And even though I won't use the line work to shade, it does give me a chance to make sure that I know where the darkest parts of the skull are going to be. And I'm just going off of, you know, years of pencil drawing, sketchbook stuff, drawing things in real life. We also know there's going to be a little bit of skin in here to kind of give the jaw a little bit of a finish in there. Okay. Yeah, this is looking pretty good. Okay. And one of the few things you get with dinosaurs, you don't really have eyebrows. So kind of thinking about how I might shape the eye in, I can bring his eye down with a heavy eyelid and then make sure that I got the kind of keeping what the eyeball might look like at the front there. Sometimes it's worth just getting, yeah, see, he's looking a little angry now. Let's back that off. We want him to be like irrelevant with a little bit of moxie in there. So let's kind of like lighten that up just a little bit. Yeah, that looks a little better. And again, friends, I really don't know where I'm taking this right now. I just kind of know that I wanted to do this dinosaur. Sometimes the feeling comes out a little easier than others. Yeah, this, I think that was a little too much on it. We'll just keep it kind of ambiguous there. Cool. And as I use them later on, I can always kind of tilt the head, make him look like he's like talking up, or have him pointing down off of the screen there. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Cool. That looks good. All right, I'm digging it. A couple of the other things that I try to get fleshed in as a part of this is in these big spaces in here. This is kind of another area where you would have kind of some interesting fleshy pieces coming in. So I usually try to think a little bit about how the skull is shaped in there. And there's typically kind of an interesting area like this. There's a little kind of bulbous in there. The other things to consider too is that when I'm in here underneath of these horn ridges, this is definitely a darker area for us. Yeah, that's looking a lot better. Cool. Thinking a little bit about how the eyeball would actually sit in the skull, and there's usually some extra kind of shading that's happening in there as well. Nice. Okay, that's coming along. Now, about this time, and I'll come back with the teeth and work them in a little bit more later on as well. We usually want to consider, is there a tongue that's lolling out in here? What do we got from a tongue perspective? Okay, and then really kind of trying to think a little bit more about my depth that I'm trying to add here. Sometimes my pen freaks out a little bit on me there. That looks pretty good. And this is one of the things I love about digital art is that I have so much. I can do all those cool things with the pencil style SketchUp like this. We need to think a little bit more about the neck and the head back in here. And theropods are crazy. With these guys, they have these big skulls and these big, strong necks. So even the neck comes back off of here quite a bit further. Yeah, indeed. If we take a look, you can see that that's pretty high up there. Okay, so I'm digging this. And this particular one, if you look at the guy that I'm using up here, he's got this kind of turned backwards thing going on. So what I try to imagine is the center line under the jaw. Okay. If he's turning and looking back over his shoulder, there's going to be a pretty pronounced kind of turn in the neck there. And so that's going to come back around to the front of his chest. And then the rest of this kind of turns back around. And I got to kind of fiddle with this a little bit here and see how much is too much out here. That looks pretty good. Yeah, okay, cool. So that's looking pretty good. There's also a little ear thing that kind of happens up in here. And on this particular one, they've got kind of some cool, I guess sort of raised is the right word for it. You've got kind of this ridge that forms along the back of the skull, back of the neck there. And you can see that's part of the, yeah. Yep. All right, cool. It's looking pretty good. There's also a big neck muscle that's kind of turning here as well. And that'll need some shading on it. A lot of this stuff I'll come back later with the right level of detail. Yeah. All right, so we're looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy with the rough sketch here now. So what I want to do then is go ahead and switch on over to actually doing some of the pen work on top of it. So we got our Ceratosaurus all kind of mocked up here. It's going pretty good. Since it's hard to see on screen, I'll show you the little colors. So this little dude is coming to life here. Before I get into drawing, I do like to get some of the color pieces that I want to use here. So we'll just kind of make sure that I like the colors. I'm working off of this kind of this burnt red and this dark blue. Okay, so one of the things that I like to use is, in fact, I don't know if you can't quite see it there, but I keep a color palette over here. And since I'm drawing this stuff to use with my CBT Nuggets video, I originally started by using this Nugget Gold. And that is kind of our trademark gold color that we use. And then I've used the Illustrator color guide to kind of go through and show me some complementary colors. So I've built this all out using Nugget Gold. And I've also used the AWS orange color, which are actually really interesting. Those two colors work really well together, so I kind of use those colors quite a bit. And if I take a look down in here, I have a light blue that I like to work off of, and that's a pretty good color. Let me play around with that a little bit here. So that would be a blue kind of like this. I also have a dark red from my AWS palette. Oh yeah, I wanted to fix that up. Make those... All right, cool. So if we did that light blue again, there is the blue. Here's the dark red. I like those for the most part. I know that those colors work well together already. The other thing I can do then is play around with some of the highlight colors that we might use in there. Yeah, maybe a little lighter even. No, let's go the other direction here. And then I can also play around with some of the dark color that I'll be using in there. And you can see I'm just kind of playing around with seeing what they look like side by side. If I take a look at the blue here, the blue is probably going to end up being probably quite a bit darker, kind of like this. And then probably using a lighter shade of that. My pen doesn't want to take the color there. Cool. For the most part, I like those colors. I know that they're going to work pretty well with the AWS colors that I use and the CBT Nuggets colors. So I'm pretty happy with that part so far. So now I've got kind of the sketch. I've got the dinosaur itself. And, you know, one thing I'm kind of thinking here, too, is that as I'm looking at this, I'm trying to imagine using it in a video. And I'm thinking that I need a little bit more neck. So I do want to make sure that I get enough neck on this here. I'm going to make sure that I bring that on down a little bit further here and just make sure that that I get enough body and neck on here. It gets a little tricky. I usually like to have the head pretty well, so I'm kind of torn on how to do this one. Because right now it'll be tough to get him to pop up off the bottom of the screen if I don't put enough neck on it. So let's try to go maybe just a little bit more like this down in here. And that's looking a little better. It also gives me a nice chance to kind of show some of the profile of that ridge there. And this is how I draw when I'm doing pencil work. I just try to keep it real light, and you can always add more. It's kind of like my dad used to say when we were building stuff. He'd be like, well, you know, you can make it shorter as many times as you want. You just keep cutting that board. It gets harder if you want to make it longer. So that's the tricky part. Same idea with the pencil work here. I can always add more, but taking stuff away when you're doing pen, that's difficult. But of course, now we're using digital pens, so that makes it a lot easier for me. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Make sure we got that shaded in there a little bit. Yeah, and I think that'll show up off of the screen well enough there that I can just kind of pretend that he's been drawn in the rest of the way. Okay, cool. So I'm going to go ahead and lock that little sketching layer there so I don't accidentally make any changes to it. How are we doing on time here? Cool, about half an hour in. Great. So now here's the tricky part, friends. This is the part where I've got the sketch. I like it, and I like real detailed drawings. But what I want to do here is pull off something that's nice and fun and free form that pulls together all of the good vibes of the dinosaur without getting it super busy on the line work. And for me, it's all about a good black line first. So we'll go ahead and start with the black line next. What I'll do for the black line work is I do want a nice taper to it, so it gives me my pressure sensitivity on it. So I'll be using a black pen for that part. Typically, I'll go with the thickest one that I can. And this is a pretty thick pen that I'm using right now. And I'll just start a little bit just to kind of see how that's working. I want full opaque on this so that it gives me a nice solid line. Yeah, I think that's going to work really well. And I find too, the dinosaurs that I'm happiest with, the ones that I use the most, are the ones where I didn't get too buried on the details on it. So let's kind of start off here with a nice little work on the little horn here. And I may very well come back later on and do a little detail adjustment on the lines themselves. But for now, I want to make sure that I get the right quality of line that I'm looking for here. So I am often looking at the thickness of the line, how it relates to some of the other lines. Now I am just using the brush tool. So these lines are not getting joined together like you might see with the pen tool. Yeah. The really big ones here, like these big long lines like this, these are always some of the trickier ones. And I usually try not to go back and fiddle with it too much. I like to keep them organic as much as I can, just so it doesn't feel super digitally worked, but you always got to check it later on. So kind of see here. This is one of the other things I love about my Cintiq monitor. I can rotate it. You guys probably can't see that on here, but I'm rotating it a little bit. And just like a piece of paper, that's what I would normally do. So that looks pretty good. Now, real quick check. Let's just check and see. That's looking pretty good. All right, let's kind of go through. And with the pen work here, I don't really want to have to go back and do a bunch of touch-ups, so I'd like to get them all laid in the right order if possible, but that's a little tricky. So I'm trying to do the tongue next. That way I can lay that back jawline down behind it. Yep. And you know, one of the funny things about a lot of this pen work is that sometimes it's best just to not draw a particular section and let it kind of just be suggested. So when stuff goes behind something else, you'll see I'm kind of just leaving that as is. I don't necessarily need it to. And then when I want to soften up a transition, kind of like at the jaw there, sometimes I'll do some nice little cross strokes against it just to kind of break that line up a little bit there. Remember, friends, it's tricky. We're doing less is more here. And all right, let's go ahead and try to work on these ridge horns. And I know that for the most part, the ridge horns are really part of the ridge itself. So I want to make sure that they kind of help establish that. And in a lot of the big theropods, that ridge line will even continue down over there, over the nostrils here. Yep. Oh, see, I'm trying to shade too much. Don't do it, Bart. Don't do it. Resist the temptation. All right, that's looking pretty good. Cool. And even though I like my sketch here, it's not about the sketch. The sketch isn't going to be the thing that I end up using in the end. I want to make sure that I'm getting the right quality of line that I like from the sketch itself. That looks pretty good. Cool. And there's our little ridge up top. Try to give a little hint at the skull there. Do a little turny turn. No, that didn't work. All right, let's do this here. And, you know, I used to be really super focused on getting the lines just perfect. But now I really kind of like to keep them as loose and organic as possible and just really let them develop on their own and keep checking that a little bit. All right, this is looking pretty good. Cool. So then, yeah, how am I doing? All right, about ready to put the eyeball in here. And then we're going to have some bone ridges in here that we want to kind of worry about. And maybe go ahead and risk the pupil just to kind of get it. That's looking pretty good. Cool. Maybe throw these in. And when in doubt with the pen work here, I'll only focus on just a little bit of work on the bottom of it. With the big thick black line, you don't want to get your lines up into your highlights areas there. So that's actually maybe a little too strong there. Let's try that. And if I get to a spot that's really too strong, I will adjust the size of my brush a little bit just so that it gives me a little bit more control over that fine feel that I'm trying to create. And now that we got this looking pretty good, it's probably about time to go ahead and switch off of the sketch mode and just kind of continue on in color mode. So for this, I usually kind of switch over to just making sure that all of my lines match up real nicely. So I'll actually come in here to Illustrator. Let's see, grab my pen tool. Was it A? Yeah, there we go. And I'll just adjust the lines just a little bit here, just to make sure that they line up real nice. I'm not that worried about them hitting each other perfectly. And sometimes for a really nice line, I might join the paths together and just get them to extend all the way. But with a lot of this work, I'm actually okay with letting it overflow a little bit like this. And for an area like here underneath of the horn, this actually would be a little proud of the horn because you'd have some skin kind of knurled around the horn there. So I'm going to kind of bump that in just ever so slightly. And again, I kind of like some of the happy accidents that, that occur in here when I'm working with the pen work. It's part of what I would normally not be able to adjust if this was actually a pen drawing. Okay, that looks pretty good there. Let's go ahead and fix up that horn just a little bit. Now, since that's going back behind there, it gives me just a slight little chance to adjust that a little bit. And, it's kind of interesting with these vector-based drawings like this. It really gives me a chance to come on, this thing's not working. I grabbed a point. That's the one I want. There we go. Really gives me a chance to play around with cartooning. I mean, I love to draw animals in real life, but doing them as cartoons and as characters like this, it's a totally different sort of vibe. All right, that's looking pretty good. And you zoom him out a little bit there and kind of get a feel for what he would be at thumbnail size. I like it. I like it. You're right, Sean. I am not very good at days off. If it's a day off, I usually kind of like, I should be building something. I should be doing something here. Thanks for hanging out if you guys are watching today. My name's Bart Castle, by the way. Just kind of hanging out, drawing a new dinosaur for upcoming training videos. It's part of my shtick. I love to keep the dinosaurs around and, you know, kind of just bring some life to my training videos. And it's also fun. They can be schmarmy, they can have funny attitudes, and they can pop up in the videos and kind of bring some of that attitude to life. Cool. So today I am drawing this Ceratosaurus, and I got a little bit more cleanup to do in here. Nice. And, you know, it might seem like a lot of work to do some of this just to use them in training videos, but once I get them mocked up like this, I can use them dozens and dozens of times. So it's not so bad. There we go. There we go. Let's clean that up there too. Cool. Yeah, and I've been using Illustrator to do illustrations like this for not that long. I mean, I was, like I said, a traditional graphic artist, and I do a lot of painting where I'll use watercolors, and then I'll come back with pen on top of it. So I know what I want my lines to look like. And what's kind of cool is that with Illustrator, I just have all this configurability. Like this one stroke right here is a little thick. So if I go over here into the stroke, I can actually thin it out just a little bit and make that taper off nicer at the top than what it would have done when I first drew it. So that's a good little combination there. Let's go ahead and add that up here. And, you know, as I'm kind of doing this, I'm thinking to myself, well, what kind of attitude is this dinosaur going to have? Is he going to be angry about scalability? Is he going to be angry about bad application design? Because that's a big concern. Dinosaurs were a winning design, and they lived for a long time. So for them, they're very concerned about proper design. You got to have the right design there. We're around for a long time. Very successful. Okay, so moving on back here, let's just take a look at the head. That's looking pretty good. If stuff is spaced kind of funny like this, I can grab it and move it around a little bit too. Yeah, it's kind of fun. Move this guy on over. And if you guys are just joining me and you're, or maybe you've come along later on and you're watching this post-recording, you can check out all my training over at CBT Nuggets, learn.gg/BartCastle, or Bart-Castle. And I'll try to throw that up in the chat window if anybody wants to check it out. No, I don't train on dinosaurs, actually. No, it's technology training, specifically focusing on AWS quite a bit these days. About to release some more cloud content that's going to be a part of a Cisco course. Kind of excited about that. Let's fix this neck up just a little bit here. Yeah, this is looking good. And since I kind of like this line, I think I'm just going to go ahead and stretch it on down here a little bit farther just to make sure that I can come back and get as much crop and exposure as I need on that. Okay, I'm digging this. This is looking pretty good. Cool. Let's go ahead and zoom on in here. A couple of little details that I haven't put in yet. Let's go back over to drawing mode here. Great. I think my music stopped. Come on, music. Gotta have the tunes while you're drawing, you know. Gotta have some tunes on. Okay, so let's go ahead and throw in the skin flap here a little bit. And that usually gets a little bit of shading like so. And then the teeth. We haven't drawn the teeth yet. Now, the teeth for me are very important for sure, as you might imagine. So I'll start with the foreground teeth. The teeth are on the front of the jaw towards the side of the viewer here. And then I'll come back and probably just remove a lot of parts of this stroke that's back behind it here. But that's okay. Just kind of think about what you want them to look like. And again, I don't need a ton of definition on the teeth here. It's more about giving the hinting that the teeth are there because people are expecting that already. And so now that I got those kind of sketched in, let me see what this looks like zoomed out a little bit there. Yeah, we said it was about the bottom third that we wanted. That looks pretty good. So if I cruise on in here now, I can go ahead and cut up this line. So I'll cut that up. And I think I'm just going to pull that out all the way. Yeah. And I'm using my little snipper tool so I can take out parts of the line. That looks a little too thick for me, so let's shrink that down. Oh yeah, this is good. Nice, having a good time. Appreciate y'all hanging out. If anybody's watching or if you come by later on, I think it's real important that you not only do fun things with your career, but you find something that you really love and something that you can indulge as a part of the efforts of your career. And for me, having a chance to make training videos and draw dinos and mash all that stuff together is a big part of what I really love to do. Cool. So this is looking really good. I'm going to go ahead and make sure I saved it. Oh my gosh. I can't believe I made it this far without saving it. Illustrator is pretty good at like, file recovery. You can definitely get yourself into trouble with that. Okay, cool. So this is the exciting part for me. This is where I finally get to go and do the coloring part. When I get a good line work like this down, I'm super happy and ready to go ahead and start doing some coloring. So let's jump on in. And over here, if you can kind of see the project that I'm working on, I'm going to lock my drawing layer. So that's my black layer. I'm going to jump down to the color layer. And the cool thing about this is that with the color layer, I now have that drawing behind the other layer. Now, what I'll typically do is I'll typically switch to a brush that gives me a really big fill. And let's see here. Yeah. And that is actually not as big as I need. Yeah, I need a lot bigger, huh? So let me see here. Where do we get that brush? Yeah, there we go. 30 point. Give me a 60 point. That's what I'm looking for. All right. So customize that brush there a little bit. And this is a fixed width brush, so it'll just give me a nice hard line. Oh yeah, there we go. Okay, that's looking much better. Cool. So now I've got a couple different brushes I can work with. And you'll see as I color back here, it goes behind the line, which is super cool. I remember when I first started doing this, how excited I was getting it to do that. The idea that I could just force the color to live behind it worked out exceedingly well. So let's go ahead and get some big fill going in here. And I'm going to go ahead and switch over to a little closer up zoom so you can kind of see everything I'm doing here. And there we go. And the cool thing is then I can kind of just draw right over the lines. And there we go. That's looking pretty good. And I'll just take it right down off of the screen. That looks pretty good. And I know that this is going to have that red. So where do I want it to start? Well, looking at the dino up here, it kind of starts up above his arms. So that's probably good for now. The rest of it would be that mid-tone color. And I'm going to keep this color handy. Just kind of set it aside over here. Cool. Okay, great. So next, let's go ahead and get on into the red. So that's my red color there. And I think I like it. I'm just going to go ahead and try it and see how that looks against it. Looks pretty good. All right, cool. Well, let's go ahead and get this as much as I can. I try to use the biggest brush I can for this fill work. Yep. There you go. And even though these bones right here, they might be a little different color, it's still good for me mentally to kind of get everything blocked out. And again, when I'm using a big, thick brush like this, it helps me limit how much detail I put into it. Because as a detail artist, you end up putting in a lot more than what you might really need in it. Oh yeah, I'm loving this color scheme. This is going to pop really nicely. Cool. Oh, I just realized too, I didn't draw the upper teeth. I have to go back and do that real quick. Now, if it's something like teeth, I probably won't mask them in like this. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I won't mask them in. And I just want to say special thanks to CBT Nuggets for helping me get some of this great drawing gear that I have here. I love this Cintiq Wacom screen. And that was something that they got me as a part of the initial setup for for doing our whiteboarding. Now, it certainly does whiteboarding, but it does a lot more for me than I think some of the others might be using it for. Now, what I'll probably come back and do to kind of soften up the transition here is we'll make it kind of hard here. And then I'll come back and kind of speckle in the transition from the one color to the other. And now that it's getting a little tighter, I'm going to need a different size brush to get back in here. Yeah, there we go. That's better. So I make myself a line drawing and I color it in just like I would with my kids. Works pretty well for me. Great. So that's looking pretty good. Looking pretty fun so far. Let's go ahead and shade in the horn too. Now for now, I'm just going to go ahead and make them all red. One of the things that I get concerned about is that if I'm drawing on a white backdrop like this and I want something to be white and then have the dinosaur still be transparent in the background, I can run into some problems where it's hard to tell how much that transparent masking has actually happened in the background. So I'll go in and kind of use this here. It also helps to kind of get a little closer. You can kind of spot the parts that are showing up. So that way later when I want to make the teeth white, at least I can go through and cover up the red that's showing through on the back. If it's just white in the background, then I won't know that it's been covered up. And later on when I go to put it into a video or have it mask something else, what do you know? You can suddenly see behind it in the background. Yeah. Saw a couple folks in the chat window over here. What's going on, friends? Nah, man, we're just hanging out. Well, it's good, Sean. Hey, Sean, I know you got a lot of drawings out there, buddy. You know, this is one way to kind of do it. All right, let's keep going here. Appreciate everybody hanging out. I really needed to do something like this today. Sometimes I get really kind of overwhelmed with recording and trying to keep up with the constant evolution of technology out there, the avalanche of change that it represents, and taking a few minutes to sit down and just zone out on sketching like this is a great hobby that I can do at my desk. I don't have to go out in the woods. I don't have to like get up and leave. I can just kind of get right into this here. And as I see, I'm getting smaller now. I'm using the smaller brushes to fit into some of these locations. And I'm also noticing this one right here. Yeah, that didn't take properly there. So let's clean that up a little bit there. That's good. Cool. Nice. There's a little spot right there too. Okay, let's get those teeth done. I forgot to do that. Let me go back up to my black layer here. And we'll go ahead and put on the teeth. Yeah, looks pretty good. And we said they'd come back to about a third of the way back, so let's start out here. And they're nice fangly cartoon teeth too, which is always fun. But again, I find that people like the suggestion of the line as much as they like the real finite lines. Now I didn't get the angle right on that. If we look at his teeth there, you can kind of see that they're shorter up front. They get real long on that real pointed bite surface where they're going to do all their ripping and tearing. And they get a lot smaller. So let's try that a little differently here. And the cool thing is with this upper jaw like this, I really don't have to show the teeth that are in the back. I can kind of just do it this way. I think that's looking all right. You wouldn't be able to see the teeth that are back behind that, so I can kind of cheat a little bit. All right, cool. So if anybody's out there, do we got any AWS certification friends out there? Anybody studying for anything today? We getting certified? We all just going crazy in the pandemic land? I hope you're able to find something fun to get into. All right, so that's looking good. I can go ahead and close my line up. I'm just gonna go with it, friends. That looks good. I'm working with it. We got some teeth. Dino has teeth. Great. And if I want to grab that color again, I just grab this one. That's the color I want. All right, cool. Let's get these colored in like this. Nice. I just got done listening to a book the other day called Grown Up's Guide to Dinosaurs. It was pretty good. It was like a bunch of stories about modern paleontology discoveries that have been happening. It's still an incredibly exciting field out there, friends. If you're into dinosaurs at all, I'm a huge fan. And paleontology is just making all sorts of exciting discoveries still. And interestingly, a lot of the success that they're having right now, it's based on advances in technology. So the idea that we can 3D scan a skull and get this 3D model of it, and then digitally attach muscles and skin, and then also play around with the dynamics of them opening and closing their jaws. It's a pretty exciting process, and a lot of paleontology discoveries are around modeling these creatures using computer-generated models, which is really slick. A good example of this might be a question like, could a Tyrannosaurus bite a person in half? Okay, well, that's a pretty shocking notion. But to actually prove that out and figure out, well, would that work? How would that work? They need to understand the bite force. They need to understand the way that the teeth lock together. They need to understand how much the jaw compresses in certain places. And 3D modeling, and especially some of the engineering models, like when you're building an airplane, you want to understand how much stress a part can take. There's great software out there. As long as you program in the tensile strength and the rigidity and the reinforcement parts in there in the model, it can tell you how much strength these particular structures would have supported, given what they're made up of. So that means that a lot of paleontologists are now spending a lot of time working with computer scientists and modelers to figure out what these creatures were capable of from a physiology perspective, which is very cool, because we can't touch them, we can't see them up close like this, but we can model physical rules that we know that modern animals have about, if the muscle's this big in this area, or if the jaw hinges this way with the ratio of the skull to the tooth size, what that does to hyenas or to lions or to crocodiles. And we can apply those same rules and say, well, we know that dinos are at least made out of a lot of the same types of materials that we would expect modern creatures to be made out of there. So we can apply a lot of those rules there. And here I'm just going to kind of loosen this up a little bit, make this a little rougher, and also kind of use a little artistic license and say that maybe that coloring continues on down underneath of the jaw just a little bit there. Yeah, and that's looking pretty good. All right, cool. So Ceratosaurus is looking pretty good so far. That is the basic color and mock-up, and we're just about an hour in. So the final parts for me to go through then is to kind of shade this all out and get the detail work put in, which again, for me, is probably some of the most exciting parts of all of this, is getting to kind of really bring it to life and really play with some of the cool colors that we're using in here as well. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. Okay, so kind of moving from the front of the head backwards, let's go ahead and figure out what we want to do for, I think for the horn. The horn is calling to me here. And when I'm trying to figure out what colors to use, a lot of times this is, again, where I'll go to my color palette and I'll pick the reds. And then in Illustrator here, they have all of these wonderful little color schemes that I can kind of choose from and see what colors might play well off of another. And I kind of like this burnt umber color here. So I think I'm going to try that out a little bit. I think that looks pretty good. Yeah, that's kind of fun. So that would be kind of my mid-tone color. Okay, cool. Now, when I go in to actually do, this is what I call kind of the detail coloring parts of it. I'll usually turn off my thick brush and I'll go back into the one that's pressure sensitive. That way I get some variation in the lines. because I'm going to want to taper these things so that something gets shaded or it has some nice texture to it. I don't lose those pieces in there. Cool. All right. So let's zoom on in here. We're going to jump on over. Now, I'm still working off of my main colors layer that I have. Sometimes I'll go in and just kind of flag everything in that layer. And then just group it and lock it so that way I can't accidentally adjust those pieces in the background. That's always a good little tip. All right, let's see here. Where's my brush? See how I'm feeling about that color on there. And if anybody's listening and noticing the music back here, I'm listening to Mike Oldfield. He's one of my favorite kind of new age artists. He's been around a long time, famous from back in the days of Tubular Bells. And just good kind of zone out music stuff that I tend to listen to while I'm editing. And so just like I was saying earlier on, I want to use some of these other highlight colors here. That looks pretty good. And then this would be the dark color. Okay, I like that. Yeah. I usually try to make a note of the colors because I have a hard time getting back to them later on. Sometimes I forget where they are. So for this one here, we're just going to go ahead and kind of thicken this up a bit. Okay. And this skin, this horn, this part of the horn right here is going to be down low next to the skin. So it should have a little bit of a tapering to it. And then we want it to have kind of a rough texture in there as well. Give it a little bit of gnarliness, a little bit of flair there. Got to have some gnarliness in there. And I find it's okay to just get a little crazy with the coloring in here. Just have some fun with the lines. I'll often switch around to different brushes depending on how thick I want the lines to be in there, and give them a little bit of jagged action. And then too, for porous surfaces like a bone, I try to make good use of dots in here as well. Try to go through and mix up the size of the dots. And even though I'm up close, these might look really big. When you zoom out later on, they kind of fade on into the background a little bit there. I'm a real big fan of like pointillism and just kind of dot art as a part of it. All right, that's looking pretty good. Let me go ahead and start giving it some highlights here. And again, I'm not afraid of making some crazy lines in here too. And then anywhere that I did have some fun with some of my other lines, I usually try to reinforce those black sections, those dark sections with some highlights too. That's a good way of kind of building in some of that depth. And I never really know exactly what's going to work real well for me. So sometimes I'll see a section that I liked and I'll need to come back and add some dark to it just to make it reinforce those lines better. And then just like I was saying, sometimes it's nice to have a couple of little specklies in there too, just to make sure that you're getting this kind of natural look to it. And I'll do a little bit of that with the lighter colors too. But usually only on the surfaces where you think you're getting light. And I didn't really talk about that earlier, but with a 2/3 kind of drawing like this where the head is in this direction, I typically would have the light kind of coming top down. So that gives me a simple rule to kind of follow. All right, so the horn's looking pretty good there. Cool. Next, I'm going to go ahead and get into some of the red coloring that I'm using here. So I said I was using this dark red, and I want to go ahead and switch to the darker version of it. For big, heavy areas, like underneath of the jawline right here, often I'll switch to a brush that is a solid, thick brush, just because I really want to get that nice line the way I'm looking for, just to cover up the area as much as I need it to be. Yeah, that's good. That gives me a little more feel there. And then for some of these other sections, I can kind of taper it a little bit more myself. And as soon as we do that, it starts to add a lot of depth to the drawing right away. All right, that's looking pretty good. We know we got some nice big dark sections up underneath of here under the eye. Yep, that's looking pretty good. And often I'll just kind of outline the other strokes that are there already. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Nice. Yeah, and I'm not afraid to go and just kind of extend it on out just to give it even more push there. And this is an area that I like to add a little bit of texture in as well. Now, I try to stay away from the cross hashing too much, but it does help to give some texture with these dinos. You want to give them a little bit of skin. Cool. Yeah, there we go. Nice. That's looking good. A lot of the areas that I go and do my where I'm throwing on this shading too, I will be coming back later on. That looks pretty good. Take that out. I made a little funny line there as well. And you'll notice Illustrator, sometimes it shows the stroke that it's putting on there underneath of there. That's okay. Just kind of clean that up out of there. All right, this is looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy with our Ceratosaurus so far. Cool. All right, let's zoom on in here a little bit and work on the horns. The underside of these beautiful horns up in here. And again, I don't really know what what these colors are supposed to look like from any traditional perspective. I'm just coloring them in the way that I kind of like to see it. Nice. There we go. Cool. And then some other areas where we're going to need some shading is back behind these ridges like this. So we want to make sure we get all that darkened in nicely. Cool. That's looking pretty good. And the same idea back behind the skull, back behind the eyes there. Making sure that we get that colored in there nicely. Okay, we definitely want to darken up the underside of the lip. And like under the lip there, especially when it's a long straight line like this, I usually try to go with the fixed width line. That way I get a predictable piece there. It reinforces the line properly for me. And Illustrator is good enough to help me kind of smooth that out a little bit. So that helps a little bit there as well. Nice. Okay. Looking pretty good. Now we know we got some dark nostril action happening up in here. Okay, that looks pretty good. Whenever I do the nostrils, I usually try to bring out some of that texture there as well. Yep. And I run into a lot of situations where I got kind of a large space to fill here, and I'll just throw some of these kind of fun little styly dudes in there. Yep, that looks pretty good. This eyebrow up here definitely could use a little reinforcement as well. And then underneath of this brow ridge here, I think I want to kind of tie those together a little bit more. Nice, getting pretty good here. We got a little bit of this kind of lip ridge that they get going there. That looks cool. All right, let's draw in the bottom of the lip there next. Now with a dino that has a red head like this, I'm gonna have to figure out a good color for the tongue. I am also gonna go ahead and fill in this background color in the mouth. This dark red I'm using here will work well for that. Fill that on in underneath of the tongue. Nice, that's looking pretty good. We'll go ahead and save that up. So anybody that's watching out there, what's your favorite dinosaur? Anybody want to share what their favorite dinos are? It's okay if you don't know the names. You can say the one with the spiky things on the face. The one with the bone heads. Those are always fun. I've been playing a lot of Ark Survival Evolved. For obvious reasons. It's got all these great dinosaurs in it. A little bit of speckling in there goes a long way. My personal favorites are, I think it's Deinonychus is one of my favorites, and I also am a really big fan of Archaeopteryx, although not necessarily, you know, sometimes considered a transitionary dinosaur. Certainly one of the more interesting ones for me. Very exciting. I love the notions of how creatures moved through those different physiological shapes, always adapting along the way. Very cool stuff for me. Enjoy talking about that. All right, so we're looking pretty good. Let's throw in a little bit something on the back of the jaw here. Yeah, sometimes there's a little bit of a reinforcement there on the jaw. That looks pretty good. And we definitely need some more on the bottom of the jaw here. Very important when you're doing line work like this that you get that bottom. Whatever is going to be the darkest parts, make sure that that line is really well enforced there. Stroke width is an easy way of selling kind of the depth part of it there, just by changing the stroke width. And then anytime you get that line that's a little too straight, I just kind of break it up just a little bit like that. Yeah, that's looking really good. Cool. Take a look back over here. We're looking pretty good. And then as I'm moving into my, to this transitionary area here between the blue, I am going to rely on some heavy speckling in here to kind of make that transition. So I'm using my variable brush here, and I'm just kind of tapping my way along. And you'll see later when I get to the blue parts that I'll overlap them a little bit there. And indeed, if you've ever gotten up close to dinosaurs, I mean, if you've ever gotten up close to some animals that have markings like this, like a snake skin, and you look at the modeling that's happening on there on an amphibian, a frog, or on a toad, you'll notice that it's not really just a hard edge. There's often lots of little nubbly, little crazy things that are happening along the way that you can call those out here, and it'll definitely help with the overall look. All right, now we want a big, thick one here for this transition going around the back. And then I can kind of Just float back in on top of it there a little bit. And it's definitely good to take a pause and zoom out and kind of see how everything's fitting together. And no misgivings here. As I come back later on and try to shade some of these areas in together, sometimes I cover up marks that I made previously and I have to go back and adjust it a little bit. And this is going to look really cool. This dino is going to have this great spot right up here where I can throw the CBT nuggets on. And that's kind of part of why I chose these colors too, is to make sure that when I throw the nugget gold on there, I get a nice effect together. Some of these bigger areas I need to do a little more, a little beefier dot in here. Just that little bit of texture there gives them that nubbly skin kind of thing that you would expect to see from something that has scaly skin like we know our little dino friends here have. So a little bit speckling in there. And I'm already getting a little too down in the weeds on this. All right, we're looking pretty good. Now for the tongue, since I got to talking about it, I'm thinking this purple color is looking pretty cool. I like that purple color. I think I want to use that. Maybe a little darker actually. Yeah, let's do purple in here. There we go. Cool. Painting away. If you're just joining up, appreciate you hanging out. I'm doing a little dinosaur drawing, and this is a new dinosaur that's going to be joining me in my CBT Nuggets training videos here real soon. This is a Ceratosaurus that we're using as one of my favorite carnivores here. Pretty cool. He's got a horn on his nose. Kind of a fun combination of creatures. This particular one's going to have this purple tongue. And part of what I'm really digging here is that he's going to have these great highlight colors on it. So let's do that. That part's exciting here. We'll make sure we get this colored in the right way that we want it. I really like to take that long flowing line and then crosshash back against it there, just to make sure that you're getting the right effect. And again, continue throwing a little speckling in there just to give it some fun texture. And then this tongue, I mean, it is thick. It is dark black already, so I don't really... Just going to throw a little bit extra color down under here. And then maybe just a little speckling on here as well. Got to use it where you can, right? I think that just makes for a really nice blend of themes here. You got line work, you got the dots to give some texture in there. All right, that's looking pretty good. Cool. And remember, we're going to have white teeth in here, so that'll help a little bit. I'm digging it. This is looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and do the blue here. And then I'm going to be taking, let's see, which one is it? This color here. Yep. Yeah, there we go. Cool. All right, that looks good. And we'll just go ahead and put that right on in behind there. And I'm not worried about covering up some of these other pieces in the back here. I will fade and taper that on in a little bit more here once I'm done. Cool, that looks pretty good. And now on the back of the neck here, this is supposed to be one of my lighted surfaces, so I'm going to be kind of light with the lines on there. Okay, that looks pretty good. And then it's nice to throw in a little bit of light. Texture work here. And the cool thing about using these different width pens like I was talking about is that I can real easily control just how much detail we're adding on any of these one particular areas. All right, that's looking pretty good. Cool, so we're looking good. I think we're getting down to the end of my session here. This is looking good. I'm gonna go ahead and kind of do a little bit of that speckling you heard me talking about earlier on back in at this transition. And that helps kind of pull those different colors I've been using together. Kind of a fun organic way there. Nice. All right. Well, here we go with speckling. That's right, friends. I imagine this will be fun for people to come and watch as time lapse too. I always think that's kind of cool. Being able to come back and watch it at high speed and see it all come together in a matter of minutes. I often will publish the time lapse videos of it, but today I wanted to do it live just to kind of share and chat a little bit. Anybody who comes back and watches later on can hear me rambling about these things. All right, that's looking pretty good. Oh, back here on the shoulder, I also want to kind of mix in a little bit of this highlight color. And with the highlights on an area like this, I can get a little crazier. The texturing just a little bit, just to make sure that we're getting the part I'm looking for. Pretend that's a big vein in the neck there. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. And what's interesting for me is whenever I do these drawings, it's just cool kind of seeing the way the different parts of the body come out. And even in an area that's not on the highlighted side, I can still build in some fun textures and pieces there as well. And then also want to make sure that I'm getting a little bit of that speckling in here at that transition as well. Really like the speckling. That's one of my favorite ways to break up. Make sure that it feels natural there as well. And I may not finish all of this completely on camera today. I may just wrap this up here in the next few minutes and then do the rest of this on my own. We'll see. I don't wanted to keep it interesting for everybody as well. Yeah. And just kind of throwing those in, especially in some of the dark areas, really helps break up some of those lines. That looks pretty good. All right. Okay, so I think what I want to go ahead and do then is get into my oh yeah, I gotta do a little bit more back here. Just when I think I'm done, it always goes like this. I start thinking you're getting down to the end there, and you're like, oh, I forgot this one little section over here. And maybe even just a different shade of that blue in there. I always try to get a little bit over top of even the highlights there. Again, just to kind of keep it loose. And the cool thing about the variable pressure brush here is that each one of these dots might end up being a slightly different size. So that's kind of a cool part of the transition there, is it's kind of randomized for me. Again, something that I really like to do. I like to encourage happy accidents like that to happen in there, so that it's not just all because I put the things there, that sometimes they end up being a different size than what I might have originally expected to provide. Yeah, and then really mixing up the sizes too is another good little trick there. Make sure you get some size variation in there. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the red here because I think that's really the part that's missing for me now is getting this red figured out. Cool. So let's zoom on in and work on this. Now, I tend to, with the highlights, to keep the brush stroke as light as possible, possibly even the lightest ones that I've used in the whole drawing. Just to really make sure that I'm not, overworking anything. Gives me a little extra room to play in there. Oh, that's looking pretty good. Cool. And out here on this little area out front here, get these horns, definitely going to need some highlights up on top here. Yeah, and when you're doing these, a lot of the areas that you colored with the dark colors end up getting, splashes of that light on there just to make sure that they are in the right locations, that they all show up the way that I was intending there. And again, throw a little bit of speckly texture on in there, and that makes it look kind of nubbly, like a dinosaur does. Yep, back in here in the eye, this is a great way to get some depth in there. We kind of taper those pieces on back into where the eye's coming down. Definitely trying to think about the direction of the line that I'm adding. Some of them will work better as a crosshatch over top of what I'd already drawn on there. Other pieces might need to be slightly different. And again, anywhere that there's going to be a shadow, there's almost always a highlight somewhere nearby too. And that combination of the shadow and the highlight, that's what really creates that depth in there. And even though I am talking about a silly cartoon dinosaur, these are still things that are running through my mind as I'm doing these illustrations and trying to make the colors work for me as much as I can. Take a look back out here. That's looking pretty good. Okay. Now we're going to have some action down here as well. Cool. All right, that's looking pretty good. Let's get this guy's head up here as well. Nice. Go ahead and rotate this a little bit here. Okay. And this is where some of the muscles get real bulgy on the neck there. So we'll try to kind of add a little bit of that in. Definitely important to kind of zoom out and take a look at what's happening farther out on the scene. Make sure that we're catching everything that we wanted to get in there. Consider some of those transitions that are happening there. This looks pretty good right here too. Nice, nice. All right, thinking a little bit of this right here to kind of play off of on top. And that kind of just shapes in that ridge to horn transition that's happening there. And there's also definitely going to be a bigger kind of area right here too, where we're seeing the... Nice. All right, that's looking pretty good. Hey friends, we're just about wrapped up here. We've been drawing the Ceratosaurus today. Probably one of the most exciting parts that I can do here is throw the nuggets on here in just a sec, so I'll do that here in just a moment. But before that, let's go ahead and get the eyeballs drawn on in here, because that is definitely an important part of this step here, and get these eyeballs nice and white in the background here. And this part definitely makes the drawing pop. The eyes are the focal point most of the time. Definitely part of something you want to consider how you're framing them in. Cool. And then of course we do want to make sure that there is some depth to the eyeball there, so we are going to throw some other kind of colors in around the edges as well. And then since we are talking about eyeballs too, I'm going to jump back up to the black layer, and we're going to throw a little bit of pupil glare on there too, just like that. And that should give us just a little bit of extra coloring in there, or a little bit of extra shininess on the eyeball. It's looking pretty good. Back on the background layer here, we are using white in fill mode, and I just want to make sure that I get all of these beautiful teeth nice and white in the background here. And this was the part I was saying earlier on, that even though I filled this in red, it's easier for me to color the teeth in like this, so I know that I've gotten all the masking properly. I've done this more than a few times where I left the teeth, and then later on when I export the image and try to overlay it on stuff, suddenly you can see through the teeth because I never filled them in. And I do want to have a nice transparent kind of cutout on the dinosaur's head so that it can be laid over top of other images easily. And so a little bit of consideration about how you're going to use your drawings later on. Good stuff there. Cool. If you've enjoyed this today and you're not already subscribed and liked, give it a like, give it a subscribe, maybe share it on social networks or whatever. I'm not well known for sitting around drawing dinosaurs, but I do a lot of it. That's a big part of what I do to help prepare my material that I create at CBT Nuggets and that I create on my YouTube site as well. So if you're digging any of that, or if you've dug some other stuff that I've worked on, I'd love to hear about it. You can find me out on Twitter at CloudBart, and of course in the CBT Nuggets catalog as well. The link is there in the comments, and I'll try to come back and update the description later on. So that's looking pretty good. We got the teeth all fleshed in on the top. Let's do the bottom here now. And you can see that, I mean, even though I did those as kind of like funny lines for the teeth where I wasn't really worried about getting them real sharp looking, the combination of the white with the suggestive line work, it makes the teeth pop pretty well. They kind of show up in their own right. And who's to say that any dinosaur ever had perfect teeth? I don't know of any Jurassic orthodontists, so I imagine that they had some fangly old teeth jaws full of some funny looking teeth. So we'll just lean into that a little bit there. All right, that's looking pretty good. Now I need to do the back teeth here. Yep, all right. Hold tight. Hold still there, little Ceratosaurus. We're just about done. Nice. I appreciate you hanging out if you had a chance to stop by and watch the live drawing session today. And as we saw earlier on, we do want to go ahead and get a little bit of shading back up in here as well. So let's throw some of that on there like so. And a little bit down on the bottom here as well. And of course we can add in a little bit more on the back edges of these guys like this. Boy, I don't like the way those look. Take those out a little bit. They got a little out of control there. Yeah, let's do this again. And we'll just end them like that. That looks good. And same story down here. Boom, throw a little bit of... Give these guys just the slightest little bit of depth in here. Nice. And maybe we will finish that one off right there like that. All right, so I am pretty happy with that one there, friends. I show you the last little trick here, and that is where we go and we put the nugget touch on there. And that is a little graphic that I keep handy here. I have that available. Try to adjust it just a little bit like so. And then often I will send it back, yeah, behind the line work there as well. And there we have it, friends. CPT Nugget Ceratosaurus is ready for action. Coming to a cloud computing training video near you real soon. So I appreciate y'all hanging out today. Thanks for doing a little live drawing session with me. If you enjoyed what you were watching, give it a like, give it a subscribe, come back later on. And check out some other cool stuff. I've got other artwork, time-lapse drawings here in the rest of the collection. Beyond that, you can find me out at cbtnuggets.learn.gg/Bart-Castle and check out my cloud computing training videos there as well, and the other pretty excellent catalog from the rest of the CBT trainers. Good stuff, networking, project management, software development, you name it. Productivity tools, communication tools, good stuff. Beyond that, friends, I hope you all have a great rest of your week. My name's CloudBart, and we'll see you out there in the cloud.